The courtroom was colder than I remembered. Maybe it wasn't the air conditioning. Maybe it was just the feeling of being surrounded by people who wanted to see me lose. The echo of every step I took toward that witness stand felt heavier than my heartbeat. The moment I looked up, I saw them. My parents. The people who gave me life and then threw me away like trash. My mother crossed her arms, whispering something to my father before rolling her eyes, as if I was still the burden she left behind years ago. It's strange how life circles back. I was the boy they abandoned on my grandfather's porch. The same porch where I learned to walk, where my grandfather taught me how to plant sunflowers, where I cried for parents who never came back. And now, decades later, they were back. Not for love, not for forgiveness, but for money. When my grandfather died, I spent hours alone in his study, surrounded by the smell of old books and of wood polish. The lawyer handed me an envelope, saying softly, "He wanted you to open this yourself." My hands shook as I read the will. Every single asset, every single memory of his life, his house, his land, his savings, was left to me. I cried like a child that night, not because of the money, but because for the first time, I felt chosen. He had believed in me. But peace doesn't last long when greed finds out you're happy. 2 weeks later, I got the notice. A lawsuit, filed by my parents. I remember staring at the paper, rereading their names again and again, thinking it had to be a mistake. But it wasn't. They were suing me for my grandfather's estate, claiming I manipulated him. My parents. The people who left me to be raised by someone else. The people who didn't even show up when I graduated. Or when I turned 18. Or when I needed surgery at 12. Now they wanted to take away the only thing that made me feel loved. Every night, I sat by my window, holding my grandfather's pocket watch. The cracked glass reflected the moonlight as I wound it, listening to the faint ticking, his voice echoing in my head. "You'll never lose as long as you know your worth, Adam." But how could I believe that when the world kept reminding me I was unwanted? The day of the hearing came too soon. I walked into the courthouse, the smell of coffee and paper filling the hallways. Reporters had gathered outside, whispering about the inheritance case between estranged parents and their son. It made me sick. Inside the courtroom, my mother didn't even look nervous. My father smirked when he saw me, adjusting his tie like he was walking into a board meeting he already won. I kept my eyes on the judge. When the case started, their lawyer painted me like a manipulative orphan who preyed on an old man's loneliness. Every word stung, but I stayed silent. I knew my grandfather better than anyone. He wasn't manipulated. He was the only one who truly saw me. Then, my lawyer stood up, handing the judge a thick file. Inside was my grandfather's final statement, sealed, never to be opened unless the will was contested. The judge broke the seal. The courtroom went quiet. The only sound was the rustle of paper as he turned each page. Then he stopped, his brows furrowed, his lips parted. He looked from the document to my parents, then back to me. He said slowly, "Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, were you ever going to tell him the truth?" My mother froze. My father's jaw tightened. My stomach dropped. What truth? The judge read aloud, his voice trembling. "According to this statement, Adam Anderson is not your biological son. He is the biological son of William Anderson, your father." The world spun. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My grandfather wasn't just my guardian. He was my father. My parents weren't my Terrence. They were my brother and sister. My whole life was a lie. Gasps filled the courtroom. My mother's face turned pale. My father tried to stand up, muttering something under his breath. The judge raised a hand, silencing him. This letter explains that Adam's existence was kept secret to protect him from scandal and inheritance issues that could have destroyed your father's name. But he made it clear. He loved Adam more than life itself. My lawyer looked at me, whispering, "This changes everything." But I couldn't even process it. I was numb. The rest of the trial didn't matter. The will was upheld. The lawsuit collapsed. My parents, my brother and sister lost everything they came for. But when I looked at them walking out, heads bowed, something in me broke again. I should have felt victory. Instead, I felt emptiness. That night, I went back to my grandfather's, no, my father's, farmhouse. The porch creaked under my feet, just like it did when I was a kid. I sat down, opened the same letter the judge read, and kept reading the last paragraph again and again. "My dear son," it said, "if you're reading this, it means truth has found its way home. Mama, I couldn't raise you as my son because of the mistakes I made long before you were born. But I gave you my name, my home, and my heart. I chose you not out of guilt, but out of love. I cried harder than I ever had before. Every night of loneliness, every question I had as a child, suddenly made sense. He wasn't just a grandfather filling in for missing parents. He was a father who hid his truth to protect me. Weeks passed, but I couldn't sleep. Sometimes I'd wake up hearing my mother's voice, that cold tone saying, 'You were a mistake.' But now, for the first time, I could whisper back, 'No, I was his reason to live.' The curiosity of what else my grandfather hid kept haunting me. I searched every corner of that house, drawers, boxes, even the attic. And one night, behind a loose panel in his study wall, I found another envelope. Inside was an old photo. My father as a young man, holding me as a baby. On the back, he'd written, 'One day he'll know the truth. And when he does, he'll know he was always loved.' That broke me completely. I realized the man everyone called strict and distant had lived a life of guilt and sacrifice just to protect me from the family that never wanted me. Months later, I returned to the same courtroom, not as a victim, but to sign papers transferring a portion of the inheritance to a children's home. Because that's what he would have wanted, to give lost kids what I once prayed for: love, security, and a chance. When I walked out, the reporters were waiting again, shouting questions. "How does it feel to win?" one asked. I smiled faintly and said, "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like understanding." That night, I sat on the porch again, watching the sunset fade behind the hills. The air smelled of rain and wildflowers. I held the pocket watch, his watch, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad." And somewhere in that quiet evening, I swear I heard the faint sound of his laughter carried by the wind.